everybody, and welcome back. Welcome to show episode 3 of the Making Seamless Sales Show. I'm Art Fromm, coming to you live from Mars, Pennsylvania, which is just north of Pittsburgh, in case anybody knows about that, or you may have come through here. We actually do have a flying saucer in our little town. It's quite a tourist attraction in our one street little town, but yeah, we're right by Pittsburgh. Anyway, really good that everybody's able to join last week and watch some of the recordings. If you're watching this recording, thank you very much. We've got plenty of show notes and things, as you've probably noticed in the recording link. And for those of you that are live, feel free to drop a note in the chat wherever you're at, and Jesse will graciously let me know where you're calling in from and your job title if you're in business. Last week had a great show with longtime colleague of 20 years, Steve Bistritz. He's the inventor of the sales opportunity snapshot methodology, which is part of my portfolio, as well as the Selling to the C-Suite book and the Selling to Executives workshop. What I didn't mention last week was the fact that in my book, which is the namesake for this show, Making Seamless Sales, he, along with a couple of other partners of mine, gave me permission to use some of his diagrams and concepts because my portfolio consists of things from Steve, things from John Kerr, which is Mastering Technical Sales, things from Peter Cohan, which is Great Demo, and then other things that I've done and developed over the years. And what I did was I took a little bit from each of them because I have the unique perspective on all those different methodologies. And I picked out key things from each one and asked each one of those three for permission to use that for some of the concepts in my book because any given one of them only sees part of it. So Steve let me use a lot of it in the book. And by the way, this is also, the app that I have on Salesforce and Dynamics. But the other main thing that I wanted to mention is not only did Steve let me use some of his stuff in the book that I teach all the time, but also he wrote a foreword for the book. So that's really special. And so did John, and so did Peter. So I just wanted to mention that and kind of wrap up and remind everybody, go back and check out episode 2. It was really insightful about key decision makers and especially something we call the relevant executive, which is the person that has the most to gain or to lose. Now, for today, I'm going to just talk a little bit about some concepts that we'll work into with our very special guest, Candy Gray, in the middle part of the show. And then at the end of the show, I told everybody that I was going to do this thing sort of like similar to Dear Abby. And, for those of you in the United States, you might be familiar with that, a columnist who took viewers' sort of life challenges and answered them. And then I'm doing a little bit of a play on words there. Dear Artie, which is, ask me about your sales challenges. And I have one that I want to go over today, which I think we can all relate to. So somebody wrote in and we'll talk about that. But for today, what we're really going to focus on is the idea of what's involved during a sales process. And yes, again, this is about B2B sales and complex sales, but I know there's a lot of you watching that aren't in that particular role in your walk of life. So we'll boil this down into some things, even when it comes to how we communicate and making whatever we're trying to do easier for the other person that we're trying to communicate with. But one of the key things, and we'll start with the hard stuff and work into some of the things that might be more parallels for you, is that in a complex sale, there are many, many different roles in the sales process and many, many different client touch points. Now, the same thing is true for the buying organization, whoever the seller is trying to sell to. There's many, many different touch points there as well. We're going to cover that aspect of it at a different time. It's really the thing we need to focus on the most is about the buyer and what they're doing. But in order to help the buyer, let's look today a little bit at what we are doing to make that process as easy as possible. So the fact that in a complex sale, and even if you think about you go and buy a car, you're often talking to a salesperson and then they try and go get their manager and maybe they introduce you to the sales manager or the service manager or other things like that. It can be a little bit daunting because you're introduced to so many different people. Now, they have good intentions, perhaps, and in many sales processes, there are a bunch of different people because they need to be there. In really large companies and really complex sales, you'll have all kinds of roles. A, a sales development representative or a business development representative, an account executive. You may have an account manager. You may have a sales engineer or a solution consultant. You can have subject matter experts. Executives could come into it. Product specialists. I mean, the list goes on all the way through support and implementation. Now, can you imagine if you were the customer and all those different people were trying to talk with you? That can become very daunting and overwhelming. And what happens is in a sales process, if the sales team's doing the right job, they should be asking questions. Because as I've covered before briefly on my first episode, the way that we create value is to understand the client's needs. And only when we know their needs can we overlap our solution? And where the two of these things overlap, that's where value is. So if the sales team's doing their job right, if the salesperson trying to sell you a car is doing their job right, they should be asking questions. Where it starts to get annoying is when every single one of those people starts asking questions without seemingly having talked to the other person. Um, I remember back to when we were having our first child, and we were in the hospital, and we arrived after, my wife's water broke at 3 in the morning or whatever it was. And when we arrived, the very first person asked a bunch of questions. And then we went to the next person and they asked a bunch of the same questions. And then when we got into the room, the nurse came and asked the same, bunch of questions. And it's like, I get it. They want to make sure that they get it right. But it's like, isn't there a such thing as a patient chart? Like, didn't they go to the chart and find out some of these things? And so, even in examples like that, sometimes we can be a little annoyed as the client. Also, not only is the client sometimes annoyed, but there's friction. This causes friction internally. If you can imagine all the different handoffs and all the different information that's gathered at each stage, if that information is not passed along, that's not only annoying to the client because of all the questions being asked, but also internally it's annoying because there may be some information somebody has and they either don't think to share it, they don't have a way to share it, or they just don't share it. So that can lead to other questions or other issues internally in terms of some of the friction. And that's why one of my big themes, and again, for those of you that might not know, the reason it's called seamless sales with the SE and the AM being in capital letters, is the sales engineer and the account manager are two of the really, really key parts of any high-tech sale. And it's very important for them to work together. But studies show that they are not working together. And this has been a historical problem and why I'm looking to solve that because I've been both roles. I enable both roles. For 25 years, I've been working with companies helping both roles. And whenever they're together, it's wonderful because that's a head start. In fact, studies show that companies that work together with their pre-sales person, the sales engineer, and their salesperson, which are in the middle of this whole process and really core to the selling piece of it, when they work together better, the win rate can go up by 37%. So, the sales can increase dramatically. So next show, next week, just to give you a preview, we're going to have Michelle Afshar on here. She's the head of global sales enablement for a cybersecurity company, and she's kind of cracked the secret to that. She's going to talk about some of that, how to work together better as a team. So one of the key concepts to the whole idea of seamless sales is the idea of transferring the information across. And for any of you who are in those positions, and even if you're working with the team in a car dealership or selling health services or whatever you're doing, one of the keys and a big takeaway for today is just to communicate. Communicate together and document and share the documentation. Inside of a big company, a business to business selling company, there's usually something called a CRM system, customer relationship management system. This is the system where all the documentation should be made from the very beginning, which, oh, by the way, to add more complexity, now there's automated systems doing a lot of that with AI and stuff and starting to feed the sale process. but documenting it in the CRM system. Only thing is, a lot of salespeople hate the CRM system because all it winds up being is a bunch of information that they enter and it doesn't get shared. So one of the things that I provide, and again, we'll talk about this on a future show, is the way for that CRM system to be used properly, and where the sales opportunity snapshot I talked about that Steve Bistritz invented, my longtime partner, the way that that works into it so that sales loves being in the CRM system, and therefore that sharing can happen much more naturally. So now if the salesperson's in there and they're using something that helps them sell, now that's all documented, it's live, it's real, it's accurate, and it can be used throughout the whole process, just like that patient chart in a hospital, so that the same question doesn't have to be asked a million times. So sometimes in these sales roles, just to get us ready for Candy after the commercial in a few minutes, sometimes in these sales roles in big companies, they are fulfilled by different people. So the things that I mentioned are functions, and there's a different role or a different purpose for each of those functions. In some companies, many companies, they're big and there's different people, and that's why it's so important to communicate. In other companies, based on the type of sale, there might be one person that's fulfilling a couple different roles. In fact, in a really, really small company, if you think about it, probably there's one person fulfilling almost all the roles, including implementation and customer support. What we're going to explore a little bit is what the benefits are of having a unified team, and whether that's you as a manager or you as an individual contributor sharing with however many people are involved, or as we're going to see in Candy's case, where she has the benefit of performing a lot of those roles, being that role and that continuity. I had an experience with this for a while when I was at a division of Lockheed called FormTech, and we were selling very, very large information management systems. A lot of it was to defense contractors and others that Lockheed Martin was working with throughout the world. And what was interesting about that was that I was in a role of what we called Technical Program Coordinator, TPC. I was involved pretty much from the beginning all the way through the end. And I know one of the things about that was for my customers is that when they had me in that role, they were very thrilled because they actually had, this is so funny, they actually had up on their wall a plaque that showed all the salespeople that they had been through. So all the actual salespeople. Now, I wasn't doing the sales role, but I was doing all the contact and all the technical stuff from what they wanted all the way through implementation. And they had a plaque, the customers. I know one customer in particular, I'll never forget it. They had this plaque up on the wall, and they had these little nameplates of all the salespeople that they had been through, because often salespeople kind of churn through. And I think there was on that one maybe about 16 salespeople's names on there, and it was just incredible. So in terms of that, we're going to come back after the break, and we're going to be able to see how Candy has the benefit of fulfilling a lot of those roles, including part of the sales role. So let's go ahead and go to the break. And when we come back, we'll meet up with Candy and see what she has to say about this communication and working together as a team of one in her case.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a purpose-driven individual looking for deeper healing, clarity, and growth? Welcome to the Expansion Room, a transformative space for purpose-driven individuals. I'm Siobhan Larice, host, licensed therapist, and coach. Join me every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
All right, welcome back, everybody. And as we hear the bumper music here, I just want to start to introduce my guest, Candy Gray, friend and fellow Martian, because we both live in Mars, Pennsylvania. So a little bit about Candy real quick. Candy is a national account manager who fulfills almost all the roles that I just talked about. And it's not because her company's small, it's because her role is designed that way on purpose, and she's going to talk about that. So she identifies and partners with national organizations, big national organizations like chains, to design, propose, and provide their electronic security system installations and services. So she ensures that, and I love this when Candy, when you gave me this description, we deliver solutions that increase operational efficiencies, business continuity, and ROI. And that's so important because the stuff doesn't matter, it's what the stuff does. So the other thing about Candy that's unique is when she found out that I was writing this book, she was one of the early adopters and early reviewers of it. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So everybody, please welcome Candy Gray. Hi, Candy. So good that you're here.
Hey, Art, thanks for the invitation. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. So you've been in the trenches doing this for 20 years. You've been a sales exec, a BDM, client relation manager, and other roles that were a little bit more distinct. But now you've got this role that spans quite a bit of responsibility and can help solve some of the things we were talking about. So tell us a little bit more about what's included in your role and maybe what isn't, if there's anything that isn't included.
Sure. So I'm a national account manager, and I work for a global electronic security provider. However, in my role as a national account manager, I start the opportunity. So I'm prospecting, I find the opportunity, I set the meeting, I'm having the initial discussions with the customer, which naturally is the discovery period. Like we always need to know, why are they meeting with us, right? Why did you agree to meet with me? What are the pain points? How can I help you? And many times, that spans over multiple meetings, as you can imagine. But what I'm doing is I'm collecting information just to see how we can add value to that particular customer. Typically, we can, whether that's through system installations or maybe it's through, services. But I never walk away from my customer, meaning I never walk away from the process. So from the very first meeting, I'm there. I'm there throughout the entire sales process, closing the process, and then I move over to the implementation process. Now I have an army behind me, believe me. I have an army of project managers, program managers, engineers, service managers, and thousands of technicians. But I'm always the primary point of contact for my customers. And that creates an enormous amount of efficiency for them. It eliminates confusion, throughout the buying process, as well as the system implementation process. And then you move over to the service process. So I'm always the primary point of contact throughout the entire professional relationship.
Yeah, so key point there is that your involvement doesn't end with the sale. In
Does
fact,
not.
is it fair to say that there's a lot of challenge even after that, because what you've now found out that they want, what you've designed, what you've delivered, now you're making sure that they're, as you said, realizing the benefits of it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we need to not only meet their expectation, but as a company, our goal is to exceed the customer's expectation. And exceeding it, that's where we come in on the service side, right? So any issues, the customer may be facing. Maybe something's broken, or maybe they want to add additional features that, weren't added during the initial implementation. Then I'm the person they come to, and it's very seamless, very quick, very efficient for the customer.
Mhm. And then one more thing about that is that they oftentimes will, at a later point in time, either expand because these are often big chains and other stuff like that, right? So they'll expand or even come back to you again. So that's where you get involved once again for that continuity. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, these are so I work with multi-year contracts, and the multi-year contracts, that's also on the installation side. And again, because I work with national organizations, my territory is the United States. There's always new buildings, new locations being built, or locations closing, but then they're relocating, to maybe a better market for them. So there's just constant new implementations as well as service.
All right. So in that role, and you heard the whole setup that, when there's a lot of different people involved, that can cause some challenges. So what would you say are, let's start with just some of the pros. What are the advantages for you and your company having somebody like what you're doing in your
Mm,
role? And then what are some of the advantages for the customer? What do you see that they get out of it?
sure. Um, it definitely shortens the sales cycle for us, because what happens is the customer will bring me in as an extension of their own team. So they're sharing information, they're bringing any problems and issues to me immediately before it becomes a deal breaker problem. But I meet with them on a regular basis, and typically it feels like I'm one of their employees just because I'm that close with their team. So we're able to talk about new features, new services, new efficiencies that our company can bring to them. We can plan out years ahead. Definitely a benefit.
Yeah, and that's when you know that you're in too. So many salespeople would love to be in that position, and sort of by design, you're already there because they've known you and they trust
Yes.
you throughout the whole process. That's huge.
Yes.
What would you say are some of the challenges? Maybe some lessons learned or some things that for those that don't have that you can offer as some of the things that you've worked through and solved.
Well, I would say over the years, just definitely asking the right questions. If you have multiple people involved in your sales process, you need to get them involved early. Just share the right information. Make sure that you're giving demos, right, that the customer needs, and not just generic information. And again, I'm in a completely different role, so that's a little foreign to me. But
Mhm.
um, over the years, I've had customers make comment, I mean, over the years, not recently, about my competitors, and they were very confused, meaning at that time, the prospect, which eventually led to be a customer. Um, they didn't know who to go to, and they felt that they were being given information that didn't necessarily pertain to their needs or to their wants. And,
Mhm.
obviously I'm not in the room, but if you read between the lines, you know, I have to believe that just the right questions were not asked, or if the right questions were asked and the prospect answered, I don't think that information was communicated to
Mhm.
maybe their counterpart who may have been coming in behind them, right,
Mhm.
during the sales process.
Yeah. So you have that continuity across the whole thing in terms of
Mm.
understanding and then being able to shift as you go through and all that type of thing. It sounds like a lot of work though. How do you manage all those moving parts?
It is a lot of work. Fortunately, my company gives me the proper tools, so I'm set up pretty well. We're very efficient over here, and I've been doing this for nearly 20 years. So most of my customers, though, because they are national, um, they have a similar project layout, right? So it's not rinse and repeat, but it's definitely the same manufacturer, same systems for the most part. When there's different issues that arise from a service standpoint, but it's really not that time consuming. Once you begin working with the customer and realize all of the, similarities from location to location.
Mhm. And you mentioned that these are often very large deals, they're multi-year deals and things like that. So when it comes to quota or fulfilling whatever goals you have, I imagine that it would be hard to walk away from a situation where you're like, oh, I just want to hang on and try and make this work a little bit more. What happens in a situation like that in terms of what you can decide on or how you need to, decide how to walk away from it? Because that's got to be hard since it's a big part of your, every one of those, I'm sure, a very big deal.
They are, yeah. I don't plan on walking away, Art, so.
So what does that look like? How do you not walk away? What do you wind up doing?
Um, you just don't walk away. I mean, you know, I can't think of one situation where I've had to say, okay, I need to walk away from this opportunity, right? I mean, the customer would need to tell me, you know,
Yeah. So doing everything possible to make it work for them.
oh, everything possible. Yeah. Because I mean, if we're not the right partner, if we're not the right fit, the prospect will let us know.
Hmm.
They'll bring that information to us and they'll share, this is why, or at least, we're going to have a conversation about that.
Hmm.
And if there's anything we can do, to correct that or, make it fall more in line with what they need, then of course we do that. And sometimes there's a few times we cannot, but then the prospect makes that decision.
Hmm. Yes. And again, because you have more autonomy in terms of what you're learning and what they're trying to do, and you know what the end goals are, and you've been through this with other clients before. So you have the ability to really work with them to figure out a way that it's going to be mutually beneficial.
Of course.
Hmm. Good. Awesome. So when we come back from the break, what we're going to talk a little bit about is the some ideas that maybe you were able to apply from the book and some of the ways that you learned, and one of the things that I'm going to offer up to everybody in this episode is a worksheet that goes along with the book. So if anybody wants to look now, or you can look later, it's on teamsalesdevelopment.com. Go to the little book icon, and then right in that page there's a handout that's a fill in the blank that you can use for your opportunities as you go through the book and work on your opportunities to apply the concepts. But we'll talk a little bit about what you're able to apply, and we'll talk about a couple concepts from the book that helped you with what you've been doing. And really, because you've been doing this so long, I think also it just reinforced for you that you're doing the right thing, and you were giving me good feedback on the book, like, yeah, this is spot on. These are the things that are really making a difference in the field. So when we get back from the break, we'll dig into that a little bit deeper with Candy Gray. Stay tuned. Misalignment within your sales team or with a client stalls deals and creates unnecessary friction for you and the client, resulting in up to 37% lower win rate. If you're in pre-sales, sales, sales management, or sales enablement, and you'd like to increase revenues, win rate, margins, client satisfaction, and stay competitive, this show is for you. Hi, I'm Art Fromm, host of the Making Seamless Sales Show. Please join me live Thursdays at 7 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Hi, I'm Linda Marsanico. The E03 to Sedona is a memoir about my journey to love and compassion. It's also the name of my new broadcast on Wednesdays at 12 noon. When we are spiritual, we embrace possibilities and ideas, which strengthen our mind, body, spirit, health, and wisdom. On the E03 to Sedona broadcast, I plan to interview guests who embrace these expansive practices. Join us on Wednesdays at 12 noon on Talk Radio New York City.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
All right, welcome back. We're here with Candy Gray, and she's describing her unique role, having engagement throughout pretty much the whole client life cycle, from hello through implementation and then beyond in terms of renewal and continued relationship throughout. So, while not everybody has that opportunity or that option, the key point was that the ability to know all of that is very helpful with shorter sales cycles, happier clients, more repeat business. And so the goal for everybody, no matter if you're one person or if each role is fulfilled by different people, the ways that you can work together as a seamless team so that for the client, it feels like you're working with just somebody like Candy, even though it's multiple people. And that is difficult. That is difficult. And Candy has the advantage of being able to do that in her situation. So Candy, when it comes to some of the concepts that perhaps you did from the book or that you were reinforcing, that, yeah, these are the things that actually work. And maybe, some of the cycling in and out, some of the resources or wherever you want to go with that. What did you find that worked, or what did you do differently? And what were some of the results of that as you were looking through it?
Yeah, sure. I can tell you that my takeaway from your book um, was unexpected, completely unexpected. So just reading through it, reading how you wrote the process, with starting with an account manager, moving over to a sales engineer, and all the different roles in between. And then, I started thinking about just over the years, different conversations with different customers and prospects. And again, I keep going back to so many times they were confused. You know, who was their person? Who would they go to if they had an issue, if they did execute a contract? Or would it be a different person for, an installation versus service versus some sort of managed service? So what I did differently, Art, immediately after I read your book, was I really started driving home with my prospects and my opportunities, that I'm never going away, right? I'll be in every meeting, starting with the first meeting, um, every call. I'm involved in every single call, and there are times when, depending on the nature of the opportunity, I may need to bring in some of my expert team members. And I'm involved in that as well. But I really started driving that home. And I feel like I've been able to strengthen my relationships significantly at a very quick pace. Yeah, much more than expected. But believe me, I did not expect to get that out of your book. That is not why I read your book. But definitely a benefit for me.
Yeah, I think one of the unexpected comments that you gave, and it's actually quoted in on the book cover and things like that, is what you mentioned about what it helped you learn about your competitors. You
Yes.
want to comment on that?
Well, pretty much that exactly, but it gave me insight into those comments that, the prospects and customers have been, vaguely mentioning over the years. And I'd ask questions and they wouldn't share a lot because it didn't have anything to do with me. Um, but after reading your book, and it gives so many examples of the disconnects, the lack of communication, sending in another role after two others. And if they didn't articulate exactly, the conversations and the wants and the needs and the expectations and the buy-in process and the stakeholders, when you send another person in, you're missing the mark. So I'm trying to take advantage of any of my competitors out there who may be following that type of process.
Right. Yeah, I think it was something to the effect of I want to utilize this before my competitors read the book.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Before they get their hands on this book and straighten out their sales process.
Yeah. So when you do bring somebody in then on the theme of making it seamless, what does that look like as far as how much do they know when they're now going to be coming in and now your client seeing somebody besides you?
Yeah. Oh, they know everything. I mean, every detail. I mean, from, even from the buying process, the stakeholders, the pain points, the wants of the solution, the needs. And then, we have internal conversations about, additional value added services, even though the customer prospect did not ask for it, we still need to let them know what we're capable of. And that would be a time whenever I would bring in, maybe one of my engineers,
Mhm.
um, de- depending from which department, to discuss that. But I always tee it up with the customer. They know exactly what to expect. They receive an agenda from me. I make sure they know who's joining, who's going to be present, and they know that I'm going to be there as well.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, even though it's you who mainly knows this information, I know how process oriented you are and detail oriented. And by the way, everybody, Candy has all kinds of talents in terms of remodeling and all that. I mean, the work that you do is incredible.
Thank
When
you.
it comes to when it comes to documentation, how important is that? Because I know a lot of people think they're documenting things, and even this is where that worksheet that I provide that you can use along with the book that you can use it to test and apply all the concepts to a real opportunity. And I feel like just that mere fact of writing things down, talk about the way that you utilize that. And once again, when you're bringing anybody else in too.
Oh, no, definitely. So yeah, I mean, it's critical to document, the information, not during the meeting, but immediately after. I'm always documenting everything we discussed, solutions that I may have suggested, and maybe they didn't have a need for it now, but perhaps they will in a year from now or 3 years from now. Even while they are our customer, because remember the customers, they're also evolving as well, right? They're growing, they're evolving just like we are within our own organizations. All of that information is very well documented within my organization. It's a requirement. And then it's passed along to my team. And again, I'm having internal conversations, even pre sales. I'm having internal conversations with my team because, even though I'm the face of the company, with the customer, there's still so much more value and capability that we know we can offer. And then we start brainstorming. And then ultimately the customer makes that decision. But so whomever I bring into a meeting, they are well informed, definitely well informed. And we're also the type of organization, we're not going to sit in a meeting with a customer and pretend that maybe we know something, right? So if I bring them in and if they don't know something about that opportunity or the customer, we're encouraged just to ask. That's it, and maybe it was covered, but also, I let my prospect and customers know that, we're very transparent like that. We're there to make the most of their time, the most of our time.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can't some businesses, and I talked about this on my first show, is that even back in the day, a lot of stuff, even software solutions, you could deliver it and then the salesperson would go on to do the next thing. And whether the customer used it or not was kind of up to them, but you don't have that luxury. The in order for you to be successful, your clients have to be utilizing this and then you're supporting them through the rest of that process. So it doesn't stop at, you don't really have closing of the deal. It's that you're committing together that you're going to work through this and implement something that's successful for them so that it goes long beyond the actual signing of a contract, right? How
Oh,
far does it
absolutely.
go?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've developed relationship over the years that are still, I mean, they last decades. They just don't stop, and then they would follow me from company to company. It's the relationship, once it's started, the professional business relationship, in my mind, it never ends. It just, it just does not end, which is a wonderful thing in my industry, by the way.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, you've got clients that, the existing clients that come back to you later and want it. So it's not even that they went somewhere else or anything. It's these are your existing clients that come back. When something does go sideways, let's say there's a even an implementation, because I know that there's a lot of people that tune in that are also on the implementation of the success side, and that's what the big other theme of the book is. It's not about trying to sell, it's about enabling the buyer, enabling the client. It's about client success. So how does that work in terms of your involvement or who you get involved when maybe there is a disconnect of something that wasn't expected? What do you do about that? What does that look like?
So during an installation of a project, and again, that's one of the benefits of having or of me being involved, so close with the customer and being an extension of their team, is that if there's something wrong, something goes south, for whatever reason, maybe we didn't install two pieces of equipment, or maybe there wasn't a service added, or maybe we're delayed, 2 days. It could be many things. It's reality. It happens. If it's not brought to my attention, and typically it is, by one of my project managers, the customer brings it to my attention immediately. And we love that. And the reason we love that is because, you can imagine if you're working on, say, a 500 site implementation or a 1,500 site implementation, right? And you have, maybe 9 months to have that completed. If something's wrong early and you catch it, right? So customer brings it to our attention, we can fix it so quickly. I mean, so quickly. And then it doesn't progress, through the rest of the project rollout.
Yeah. So,
yeah, we just jump in and fix it.
Yeah.
Sooner we know, the better, and it stops it in its tracks, And I mean, understand we're not installing at one site, right? So that could probably be a big problem because you get one shot.
Awesome. So I think one of the takeaways again for everybody and some encouragement out of this is notice that because of the natural, inborn communication with Candy and herself throughout this whole thing. And I imagine you have different discussions with yourself all the time, right?
Yes.
When it comes to the, thinking things through, finding things out early, doing proper discovery at the beginning, but that continuity of the message all the way through from hello and whatever you gather from the very beginning, that is gold in terms of success for the client. So I would encourage whether you're a one, you have the full spectrum, or whether you're one of many, many different roles, try to work together better as a team and just ask the person upstream of you what they know, and then think about for the downstream person, what is it that they need to know? I learned that a long time ago. It's like, what are you going to do with what I give you? So if somebody gives me something, I want to know what the purpose of that was. What are we really trying to accomplish? So move left in the buying process and then think all the way through to client success. And even if you're not as lucky as Candy to be able to do all that with all of its challenges and rewards, then at least try to act as a seamless team in the best way possible. And if you're on the buying side of it, make sure that you are getting the continuity that you want. That should be, a seamless experience for you as a buyer. Shouldn't look like 5 or 6 different people. So any quick final remark, then we're going to go to the commercial. Anything final?
No, thanks, Art. Appreciate you inviting me. Excellent book, by the way.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
Everybody should be utilizing your book, I'm telling you.
Well, thank you for that. And thanks so much for being here and sharing your unique experiences. And everybody, again, if you go to teamsalesdevelopment.com, look for the little book icon, and then you can get access to the worksheet. It's totally complimentary, and it'll allow you to apply all these concepts immediately to help your sales go better. So thanks again, Candy. Really appreciate it. And we'll be watching the replay, I'm sure, several times over to get all the nuggets out of there. All right, let's go ahead and go to the last commercial then, and we'll be back in about 2 minutes.
On Frank About Health, we're not just talking healthcare. We're managing disruption and innovation. Over the last 4 years, I've taken you from epilepsy and COVID to mental health, caregiving, and now the front lines of healthcare transformation. Stay tuned for a healthier future as we bring on the innovators, professionals, storytellers, and advocates who show you how to own your healthcare every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
Ready to serve up success with a splash? Hi, I'm Bruce Kramer, a.k.a. the Corporate Cockroach.
I'm the Renaissance woman, Angie Snowball.
And I'm your strategy doctor, Dr. Meltesh Desange, inviting you to serving up success with a splash.
Join us as we shake things up with real talk and real strategies centered around awareness, action, and accountability.
And yes, there really is a cocktail involved. Please join us and sip your way to success.
Serving up success with a splash, where wisdom meets happy hours. Cheers!
Cheers.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
All right, everybody. So thanks again so much to Candy for that. That was great insight and inspiration for all of us in terms of the ideal scenario of seeming like you're just one entity and make it real easy for the buyer and seamless for them. Um, so, and by the way, that last commercial with serving up success with a splash, that's a really fun show. It's right before my show. It's from 6 until 7 p.m. on Thursdays. And what they do, you might have caught it in the commercial, is they always have a recipe for a drink that they have you prepare the ingredients in advance, and then you can make the drink either right before or during the show. And then typically the drink has a theme to it. I think last week the theme was, or 2 weeks ago, the theme was clarity. So they had some kind of drink that, was just a nice, clear, crisp drink. So they're a fun bunch, and I really appreciate them. I know that they often give me a shout out, and I want to return the favor to them since they're right before me. And maybe some of you came from their show and you're already, have consumed 2 or 3 of their drinks that they recommended. But in any event, thanks for being here again. So this last segment that I want to cover is again on the theme of like the Dear Abby, the calling in or writing in a problem that you might have, and then see if we could get some life advice. And in this case, it's sales advice. And remember, everybody, at its core, sales is really persuasion. Sales is really about influence. And so we don't always have to be selling a product or selling a thing when we are trying to sell somebody on an idea, perhaps, or trying to sell somebody to agree with us or help them to see things a different way. This came in from somebody who had a situation. I'll just read the situation, and then what I want to do is give a bunch of different suggestions for it. Unfortunately, I don't have the opportunity to follow up, and dig deeper, which is what I normally would do here. But I had some suggestions and some ideas that might help everybody out. And perhaps you've been in a situation like this. Maybe you're going through this right now. I know personally, I have been in this situation before. So I think you'll all relate to this, and you can hear what some of the advice is. So, all right, dear Artie, how do you recommend handling a situation where there's a lot of nepotism or favoritism within an organization where a formal executive decision maker only takes suggestions from their immediate influencers, which in this person's case apparently was mostly family? It doesn't always have to be family, but the idea of some kind of tight circle where this higher level decision maker only really talks with them. And this is about you working inside that company. So frustratingly, common sense business strategies are played down when offered by those outside of the circle. So this is kind of like selling internally. We've tried many ways to present ideas through the influencers or directly, but the suggestions are always ignored. So basically, we've given up, which is a shame. I mean, it's really sad when it boils down to this. So I've got some suggestions to try to help. I know I was in one situation a long time ago where something similar to this was happening, and I did not say anything either. I wound up leaving that company, and believe it or not, 4 months later, they folded. And I'm not saying that they folded because I left. I think that they folded because there was a lot of problems and they weren't listening to their own people. And then the owner of the company called me and said, "Hey, Art, I noticed you left like 4 months before we folded. Can you tell me about your experience?" And I told him that I was trying to get some messages through, but the inner circle wasn't letting it happen. And he said, "I wish you would have told me. I wish you would have told me." And those words have echoed in my mind ever since, is like, try to figure out a way. So here's some ideas for this particular person's situation. one of the things, and this goes back to what we talked about last week with Steve Bistritz about the relevant executive. So, relevant executive was defined as the person that has the most to gain or the most to lose. And the idea with that is if they have the most to gain or the most to lose based on the outcome of a situation, they have skin in the game. And if they have skin in the game, they should be wanting to figure out how to be successful. They should want the best for not only themselves, but for the others in the organization. So that's part of what we're going to talk about here. So one suggestion is influencing the influencers. Now, in this person's case, they said they tried that, but the influencers aren't letting it happen. And I think what we want to try to do here is find out what is the win in it for the influencers, even if they are actually family members or whether or not they are just some kind of inner circle, they must have something that is going to be a win for them. And if we can position that we are helping them to have a win, now when that gets proposed upward, that can be a win for everybody. So that's one thing. So secondly, see if you could determine who is impacted by the lack of a response. So if there's a really good business idea here that's not being followed through, there must be some implications to that. Otherwise, you wouldn't be bringing it up. So does it mean issues with client satisfaction? Is it going to cause, morale issues within the company? Would it cause them to lose money, profit, whatever the case is? Try to find out what those other implications are. And when you bring it up, then it can again be for the good of everybody. So it's not just your idea, there's a reason behind that idea. And related to that is who is it that's impacted? So if you find out who's impacted, that person might be motivated to try to influence this higher level person. And I think there could be two scenarios there. One is that decision maker themselves may be impacted because of their reputation or what they would get out of it, or something that would, people would stop following them. People would not want to work for that person. So we could perhaps appeal to that, what I would call their motivation as far as what they're trying to do. And if that executive decision maker is reporting, for example, to a board or somebody like that, that board is probably the relevant executive. That board is the one that may be the one that has the most to gain or to lose. So it's all about trying to understand what the motive is and then how are these decision makers connected. Um, so if it is the executive, try to appeal to their main motivations. And so whether it's money, ego, it might be fear of looking weak. Maybe they just don't want to admit that there's a problem. That happens a lot. And I talk about that when it comes to the way people make a decision. There might be a lot of value. So if it's like a scale, there might be a lot of value to it. But on the other side of the scale is the risk of moving forward. And one of those big risks is that they could look bad. We call it, in the United States at least, we call it selling Thanksgiving to the turkey. So it's like the turkey's not interested in Thanksgiving because they get consumed at Thanksgiving. So what can we do to help them overcome any fear about the impact that would be on them or help them overcome that so that they would be successful? I think also, if there's another group that's the one that we can influence to this major decision maker, the challenge is we don't want to go around that decision maker or try to make them look bad in any way. So one of the things we talk about in the book and what a big thing we talk about last week as well is the informal influence, not just the direct role of being the executive, but what informal influence in there is there. Maybe there's a third party that could influence that person that you could work through. And then see if the group themselves have some insight. So ask questions of the group. It's like discovery when you're trying to solve a problem. What is that group trying to do in terms of what they would like to see as an outcome? And see if they are willing then to influence that decision maker directly. So if the results of the lack of following your recommendation result in, challenges for you, I would bring that up and say, look, these are the decisions that have been made. I'm trying to do this. I could either do this or I could do this. And which one do you want me to do? So sort of putting it back on your manager, on others to help them understand that there are implications to those decisions. Again, that's a half a dozen different ideas. Which one particular in this case you can decide. And perhaps if you run into this advice could help you with just sorting through it a little bit and looking at ways that you could have some seamless, influence, some persuasion around that, whether it's a B2B deal or it's your boss or even, somebody within your circle of friends or family. So once again today, I want to thank Candy for being on and sharing her experiences. Again, next week we're going to have Michelle on, who's going to talk about the way that specifically sales and pre-sales can work together and what her experience with that is and the way that she's done that. Please, if you're watching the recording, go to the website teamsalesdevelopment.com. If you take a look, there is a events page there, and right on that page you'll see the logo for the show. When you look at that, it has all the previous shows, it has who the people are, and the upcoming shows. So I've got shows lined up, not only Michelle next week, but the following 2 shows after that. Really, really good partners of mine and great insight that you're going to get from them as well. So thanks, everybody. As always, Jesse, thanks so much for your help. Please reach out to me if you want help with your sales teams, a kickoff, a keynote, other types of engagements where I can help share this knowledge and we can get a win-win out of it for you. I'd be glad to do that. Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening or wherever you're watching. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everybody. Take care.